Flashing red and blue lights bounced across the quiet cul-de-sac, and the hum of engines shattered the calm night. Janelle Carter stood stiff on the driveway of her new home, her grocery bags scattered on the ground like fallen soldiers. Her chest rose and fell with measured breaths. She had trained herself to remain calm under fire. But this was not the battlefield. This was supposed to be her sanctuary, and yet the tension was the same, too uniformed. Officers approached, their boots crunching against the asphalt while a shrill voice cut through the night air. "There she is," Kerren Mitchell pointed with dramatic flair, her manicured fingers stabbing toward Janelle, as if she had caught a thief in the act. "I told you she was trespassing." Janelle did not flinch. Her dark eyes met the officers with a quiet steadiness. Her voice, when it came, was low and controlled. "This is my house." Kerren scoffed, a laugh sharp as broken glass. "Oh, please, you expect us to believe that you people are always renting." The word stung, but Janelle refused to let the insult land. She reached into her jacket slowly, deliberately. Her hand produced an ID card, its edges gleaming under the strobe of the police lights. The officers leaned and, squinting before their postures shifted entirely. The hard suspicion in their eyes, softened, replaced by respect. The card was not just identification. It was a military ID. Kerren froze, her mouth hung open. As the weight of her mistake settled heavy in the air, the smug tilt of her chin faltered, and for the first time, she looked small, fragile, almost frightened. But the story did not begin here. It began weeks earlier when Janelle first arrived at Willow Creek Estates. She had dreamed of this moment for years, saving every dime earned during tours overseas, imagining the day she would unlock the door to a house that was hers. No landlord, no temporary quarters, no base housing, just permanence. Janelle Carter, a homeowner. The neighborhood was postcard perfect, neatly trimmed hedges, houses painted in shades of beige and gray, streets lined with ornamental trees. Families jogged with strollers, dogs barked in distant yards. It was a promise of stability, the promise she had chased for so long. When the moving truck pulled up that morning, neighbors peeked from their windows. Some smiled and waved, others lingered suspiciously, eyes narrowed, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Kerren Mitchell was the first to step forward. She wore a pastel sweater draped like armor, her lips painted a shade too bright for the hour. Her smile was thin, practiced. "Welcome, I am Kerren, head of the HOA. We like to keep things orderly around here." Her gaze flicked over the boxes scattered across the lawn, the movers, heaving furniture. Inside, she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Are you renting, or did you actually buy?" Janelle returned the smile, though it did not reach her eyes. "I bought." For a split second, the mask slipped a twitch in Kerren's cheek, a flash of surprise, maybe even disapproval, before the smile returned sharper than before. "Well, we have rules. You will find them in the packet. I will drop by later." Janelle shrugged it off. She had dealt with worse in barracks across the world, and she told herself this was nothing more than nosy neighbor syndrome. But the following days proved otherwise. Her second night in the house, she left her moving boxes stacked neatly by the garage, too tired to haul them alone. The next morning, a bright yellow notice was taped to her door: violation, improper storage, visible to street. She had barely lived there 48 hours. Janelle attended the HOA meeting later that week to introduce herself. She entered the clubhouse with cautious optimism, but the atmosphere chilled quickly. Kerren stood at the front, clipboard in hand, already in command. When Janelle rose to speak, a murmur rippled through the room. Kerren interrupted with sugary tone. "We have noticed some issues. Already boxes left outside overnight. Not exactly the kind of first impression this community values." Laughter from the back row, whispers trading like currency. Janelle felt her throat tighten. She clenched her fist beneath the table, but kept her voice steady. "I just moved, and it was one night." Kerren tilted her head to picture a feigned sympathy. "Rules are rules, dear. If everyone made excuses, this place would fall apart." Janelle wanted to protest, but she swallowed the words. She had faced far worse hostility in lands far from home, and she refused to let a homeowners association meeting break her composure. Still, a sting lingered. She left with a pit in her stomach, realizing this was not simple oversight. This was a message. Days turned into weeks. Each small act reinforced the divide. The grass trimmed by landscapers suddenly deemed too long. The mailbox slightly crooked. Fine again. Kerren stood on her porch, often watching, binoculars in hand, gossip flowing like poison to any neighbor willing to listen. Finally, Janelle decided she would face this head-on. She walked up to Kerren's pristine porch one afternoon, knocking firmly. The door swung open, and Kerren appeared, her expression already impatient. "I am not here to fight." Janelle began. "I just want to live peacefully here. I own this home. I want to belong like everyone else." Kerren's lips curled into a smile that was more sneer than welcome. "Rules are rules. Maybe this neighborhood is not for you." The words landed heavier than any fine or notice Janelle realized, and that Kerren was not simply enforcing policy. She was enforcing power, a power rooted in exclusion and arrogance. Janelle turned away from that porch with a quiet decision. She would not bow to Kerren. She would not run. Either this house was hers, this street was hers. And if Kerren wanted a war, she would soon discover she had picked the wrong opponent. The night of the police call was still weeks away, but the battle lines had already been drawn. The days bled together in a quiet storm of hostility as Janelle tried to settle into the rhythm of her new life. Each sunrise brought with it another reminder that peace in Willow Creek was a fragile illusion. Kerren made certain that rumors began to ripple through the neighborhood, whispered on porches, and exchanged between clipped smiles. When Janelle walked by, people wondered aloud how she could afford the house. People suggested she was temporary, that she would not last long. Kerren made sure those suggestions reached every ear. Janelle learned quickly that isolation was part of the strategy. Invitations to block parties never arrived. Notices for community events skipped her mailbox. Yet her absence was always noted. She passed couples on their evening strolls and heard the way conversations dropped silent the moment she neared. Only after she passed did voices rise again. Hushed conspiracies carried on the wind. She tried to focus on her work, her duties at the base, her small joys like brewing coffee in the quiet morning or tending to the modest garden she had begun out front. But every comfort was interrupted by another violation. Letter bright slips that appeared like clockwork, each one framed in the same tone of rigid order, masking venom in bureaucratic language. Lawn, not uniform edges, untidy garbage, can left visible for 5 minutes after pickup, unapproved welcome mat. At first, Janelle filed the notices away neatly in a folder, telling herself she would handle them later. But as the pile grew, so did her resolve. She began to photograph her yard, her mailbox, her porch, capturing evidence to show how absurd the complaints were. Still the harassment continued. Kerren, with her ever-watchful eyes, stood like a sentinel across the street, the perfect picture of a self-appointed guardian, protecting a vision of the neighborhood that left no space for Janelle. One evening, Janelle arrived home with arms full of groceries. The sun had already dipped, leaving the street awash in amber glow. She fumbled with her keys, bags shifting against her hips. A sudden flash of movement caught her eye. Kerren, standing on her porch, phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her eyes never left Janelle. Within minutes, the sharp glare of headlights pierced the dark. The low rumble of an engine grew louder until a police cruiser rolled to a stop at the curb. 2 officers stepped out, hands already resting on their belts. The air thickened. Janelle's heartbeat quickened, but she forced her body to remain still. "Ma'am, we received a call about a possible break-in." One officer said, his gaze flicked between Janelle and the house, his expression firm and unreadable. "This is my home." Janelle replied evenly, her voice a study in discipline. She handed over the deed she kept in her bag precisely for this moment. She showed her driver's license, each movement slow, deliberate, measured. Kerren crossed the street, as if summoned. Her voice rang with feigned concern. "Officers, I have been telling the board for weeks. She does not belong here. Look at her unloading groceries at night. Suspicious, is it not?" The words cracked against the quiet like a whip, but the officers hesitated. Their eyes returned to the documents in their hands, and then to Janelle. She stood tall, her posture rigid, her calm unshaken. Finally, one officer gave a curt nod. "Everything checks out. You are free to go, ma'am. We suggest you file a harassment complaint." Kerren's face flushed scarlet beneath the porch light. She sputtered protests, but the officers ignored her. They returned to their cruiser, leaving Kerren stranded in the glow of her own humiliation. Janelle bent to gather her spilled groceries, her mind burning with the realization that this would not be the last time Kerren tried to weaponize authority against her. That night, Janelle sat at her dining table, the stack of violation letters spread before her like pieces on a chessboard. She flipped through photographs, dates, notes, meticulously organized. Each slip of paper, each insult, each call was fuel to a fire she had been containing for weeks. She had chosen patience, thinking time, and courtesy would soften hostility, but patience had only emboldened Kerren. So Janelle changed tactics. She began researching the HOA's records, digging through bylaws and expenditures. She noticed patterns, lines, and numbers that did not quite add up. Renovations to Kerren's backyard pool listed under community maintenance funds, landscaping expenses double charged and mysteriously approved with outboard signatures. The hypocrisy was staggering. The more she uncovered, the steadier her resolve became. She was no longer merely defending her right to exist in the neighborhood. She was building a case brick by brick, evidence by evidence. Kerren had built her power on arrogance and selective enforcement. Janelle would use that very arrogance against her. She decided to share her story in a place Kerren could not control late one night. She typed out every detail from the first notice to the false police call. She attached images, documents, proof of her words. Then, with one steady breath, she pressed publish. Her post spread. Quickly, strangers rallied with outraged veterans chimed in, offering support. Neighbors from across the city condemned the behavior. By morning, her phone buzzed relentlessly, notifications stacked one atop another. The story had escaped Willow Creek. It had become bigger than her street, bigger than Kerren. It had become a symbol. When Janelle stepped onto her porch that morning, she noticed a change. The same neighbors who once averted their eyes now looked toward her with expressions mixed with guilt and curiosity. Kerren remained behind her curtains, blinds drawn, but Janelle could feel the heat of her glare. The balance had shifted subtly but unmistakably. Janelle knew the battle was far from over. Kerren would not surrender quietly, yet for the first time since moving in, Janelle felt the current bending in her direction. She had exposed cracks in Kerren's fortress, and soon those cracks would split wide open. The emergency HOA meeting drew a larger crowd than anyone expected. The clubhouse brimmed with anxious faces. Neighbors pressed shoulder to shoulder as whispers filled the stale air. Kerren sat at the head of the long, polished table, her posture rigid, her expression determined, though her eyes flickered with unease. She had called this meeting to reclaim authority, to discredit the viral storm that had painted her as a villain. But the tide had shifted, and everyone in the room knew it. Janelle entered quietly, yet her presence commanded the space. She wore her uniform crisp and immaculate, each detail gleaming with disciplined precision. The chatter faltered. As eyes followed her, she moved with calm assurance and set a thick binder on the table. The sound echoed sharp and final. Kerren forced a smile, brittle and trembling at the edges. Well, our new neighbor has decided to join us again. Perhaps she would like to explain why she's been spreading lies online. Janelle's gaze cut through the veneer. Her voice was steady, but carried a weight that silenced the murmurs. Nothing I posted was a lie. She opened the binder, pages brimming with photographs, letters, receipts, line after line of documentation. The audience leaned forward, breaths held, as she detailed each violation issued. Without cause, each fine that contradicted HOA bylaws, each instance of harassment deliberately targeted at her. Kerren interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. This is dramatization. She has twisted facts to make me look. But Janelle did not raise her voice. She simply turned the page and slid a photocopy across the table. It was an invoice approved with Kerren's signature, funds allocated to community landscaping, yet the work had been performed exclusively in Kerren's backyard. Gas erupted around the room. Janelle laid down another record double billing for maintenance, followed by notes of unapproved renovations. Kerren's pool, her fence, her patio, all funded under the guise of HOA expenses. The weight of evidence was suffocating. Kerren's composure cracked. She stammered, reaching for excuses, but none found footing. This is being taken out of context. I was doing what was best for the community. A neighbor rose from the back, his voice sharp. Best for the community or best for yourself? The words ignited murmurs of agreement. Heads turned toward Kerren. Eyes that once looked up to her now glared with suspicion and anger. Another neighbor spoke. She fined my son for parking overnight, but let her friend keep a boat in the driveway for months. Kerren's face flushed, her shoulders tightening, as if bracing against the avalanche of betrayal. She slammed her hand on the table. I have dedicated years to preserving this neighborhood, and you all dare to question me. Because of her, she jabbed a finger at Janelle. Janelle remained unshaken. She pulled one final card from her binder, a copy of the police report from the night Kerren had called officers onto the document, detailed a false claim made by Kerren of misuse of emergency services. Kerren's lips parted, as if to protest, but no sound emerged. Her eyes darted across the room, searching for an ally, finding only stone-faced neighbors. Then the cameras clicked. Local news crews had slipped in, capturing every moment. Their lenses reflected the raw collapse of Kerren's authority, the perfect suburban queen, unraveling. In real time, Kerren lifted a hand to shield her face, but the damage was irreversible. The very spotlight she once craved now burned her. The HOA president cleared his throat, his voice heavy with finality. Given the evidence presented, I motion for the immediate removal of Kerren Mitchell from her position, effective immediately. The vote was swift, unanimous, every hand raised except Kerren's. Kerren's chair screeched against the tile as she stood trembling with rage. This is a witch hunt. You will regret siding with her. But her words rang hollow. The power had drained from her voice. She stormed toward the exit, her footsteps echoing retreat that felt permanent. Silence lingered heavy after her departure. Then slowly neighbors turned to Janelle, their expressions softened, some apologetic, others grateful. A woman near the front spoke first. I am sorry for not standing up sooner. You should never have had to go through this alone. Janelle nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. What matters is that the truth is out. Her words carried no triumph, only quiet certainty. She had fought battles in deserts and mountains across the world, but this victory felt different. This was not just survival, it was justice. Over the following weeks, the fallout spread. Kerren faced investigations into financial misconduct and fines, a misusing community, funds, her reputation shattered. She became a pariah in the very neighborhood. She once ruled Janelle watched from her porch as moving trucks eventually pulled up to Kerren's house. The irony not lost on her. Neighbors who once avoided her now waved when passing. Some stopped to chat, lingering on sidewalks, offering baked goods, apologies, small gestures that marked a slow shift in the fabric of the community. The isolation had fractured into something warmer, something cautiously hopeful. One evening, Janelle sat on her porch, the sky streaked with shades of gold. She sipped coffee, the breeze rustling the leaves above her phone buzzed with another message of support from strangers across the country. Her story had struck a chord, resonating with countless others who had faced their own battles against arrogance and prejudice. She smiled softly, realizing her fight had carried weight far beyond Willow Creek. As the street quieted, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had bought this house to find peace, to carve out a place that was hers against all odds. Kerren had tried to strip that from her, but in the end, Kerren had only exposed her own weakness. Janelle's strength had never been in aggression, but in patience, discipline, and truth. She set her cup down, stood, and stretched her eyes, sweeping across the street for first time since moving, and she felt the neighborhood belonged to her, as much as she belonged to it. And with that certainty came a calm deeper than any victory chant. She whispered to herself with a wry smile, "Next time she calls the cops, she'd better check who she is messing with." And the words lingered in the dusk, not bitter, not angry, but triumphant in their quiet justice. The morning sun crept over Willow Creek, painting the rooftops in amber light. Janelle stood at her window, her hands wrapped around a mug of steaming coffee. She could feel the stillness that had replaced weeks of tension. The street no longer buzzed with suspicion. Instead, neighbors waved from their porches, children's laughter carried to the crisp air, and for the first time the silence around her house felt like peace, yet beneath that peace there lingered the memory of the war she had fought. The scars of battle were not visible, but they pulsed quietly in her thoughts. She remembered her first encounter with Kerren, every mocking smile, every violation slip, every whisper of exclusion. Those moments had carved something deeper than anger. They had forced Janelle to face not only her neighbor, but the ghost of doubt that followed her since leaving the service. She had fought battles across oceans against enemies in uniform. Yet here in the heart of suburbia, she had been forced to fight for her dignity, her place, her right to call something home. The irony was not lost on her. Word of Kerren's downfall continued to ripple through the town. Newspapers had written columns about the scandal. News anchors debated the dangers of bias and authority on evening broadcasts. Social media had amplified Janelle's story, turning her into a symbol of resilience, a veteran who defended the country only to return home and face hostility in her own neighborhood. People reached out, veterans, families, strangers, offering solidarity. Her name had become more than just a homeowner in Willow Creek. It had become a reminder that truth and patience could break arrogance. But the spotlight did not change her. She still woke early to run along the quiet streets, still pruned her garden with methodical care, still brewed her morning coffee with the same deliberate routine. What changed was the way people saw her. A man who once avoided eye contact now stopped to shake her hand. A mother who whispered rumors before now sent her children across the street to deliver fresh muffins. A young boy from down the block asked if she could tell him stories of her time in the service. Her heart softened at these small gestures. They did not erase the pain, but they built something new, trust slowly replacing suspicion. Kerren, meanwhile, had faded from the landscape of her house, sat dark blinds drawn her presence. More ghost than threat. The HOA had removed her, stripped authority and reputation. Investigations piled upon her, each discovery more damning than the last. She had once thrived on control, but now the very community she sought to dominate rejected her. Whispers followed her not with admiration, but with scorn. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid her. Her empire built on arrogance had crumbled into dust. Yet Janelle knew the climax of this battle was not the board meeting, not the exposure, not even Kerren's retreat. The climax was within her. The true victory was reclaiming her voice, her place, her confidence. She had not simply survived Kerren's cruelty, she had transformed it into strength. One evening, the HOA hosted a gathering in the park. It was the first event since Kerren's removal. Janelle considered not attending. She despised the politics of neighborly small talk. But as she stood at her mirror, fastening the small pin on her lapel of metal, she rarely displayed. She realized this was more than an event. It was a statement she would no longer hide in the shadows of someone else's prejudice. The park glowed with lanterns, laughter rising above the hum of conversation. Neighbors mingled food tables, lined the grass, children darted between legs chasing fireflies. When Janelle arrived, the crowd shifted attention toward her conversations, paused, and resumed warmer, lighter. A man approached, extending his hand. "We are glad you stayed. This place is better with you here." Janelle smiled modestly. "I am glad, too." Throughout the evening, she listened to stories of families, their struggles, their small victories. People opened themselves to her not because she demanded it, but because she had earned their respect through resilience. They no longer saw her as an outsider, but as part of the fabric of Willow Creek. As the night drew on, a hush fell over the crowd. A figure lingered at the edge of the park. Kerren, watching from a distance, her face pale in the lantern glow, her presence stirred unease, but no one welcomed her. No one waved. The space between her and the community was wide, unbridgeable. She stood alone, clutching her sweater against the night air, before turning away, disappearing into the dark. Janelle did not follow. She did not gloat. She simply exhaled a breath. She had been holding for months. That chapter was closed. Later, she returned to her porch, the air cool against her skin. She sat in silence, staring at the house across the streetlights. Extinguished curtains, drawn, a thought settled into her chest, heavy but liberating. She had endured. She had defended her place. She had won not through rage, but through truth and perseverance. She whispered into the quiet, "This is my home, and no one will take that from me." The night answered with stillness, yet within that stillness was a promise that she had carved her place here with unshakable certainty. And as the stars spread wide across the sky, she felt a calm deeper than any victory march of triumph, not loud, not violent, but undeniable and final.